Well, welcome to the Curtis Biswell Show. It's hard to believe that this is my sixth episode, and it feels like just yesterday that I started this venture of podcasting and creating this YouTube channel specifically to um, develop transformative content to help you as worship leaders, as worship pastors. And I had a question for you today. Did you know that your worship team needs an org chart or an organizational chart? And you may be scratching your head and asking yourself, is this guy for real? Um, but here's the reality. No matter how big or small your church is, there are, I believe, six primary areas that go into cultivating a healthy and thriving worship team. And so I wanted to take some time today and break those down and to share those with you and also give you a free download to help you visualize this. So I hope you stick with me. Well, again, this bald bearded guy is coming to you in the form of YouTube or podcast. And I always like to keep the why out in front. So, like, my why in creating these videos and these podcasts is to cultivate a thriving community where worshipers are raised up in character, competence, and cognitive health, empowering local churches, colleges, and communities to flourish. And how I plan to go about that is to create transformative content, provide coaching for worship leaders, and connect them to churches in need, hopefully fostering vibrant worship communities that glorify God. So that's kind of my why and my what. And so there is a misconception in the church. Let me know if this sounds familiar to you, where many people think it's primarily up to the pastor, the lead pastor specifically, to be the only one responsible for caring and shepherding his people. I don't know if you've heard that or if even you've thought that. Now, I wanted to kind of take that misconception and overlay it with the role of a worship leader or a worship pastor. He or she is typically responsible for overseeing the musical aspect of the service. Okay, we probably already know that. That's a given. But there are a lot of other areas that tend to be regulated or kind of under their control or what they oversee. And so I want to do kind of bullet point a few of those for you today. So, yes, picking songs for Sunday or whenever your service is, overseeing or handling all things production, meaning sound, visual equipment, your live stream, all that stuff. Okay. Sometimes overseeing graphics and websites and social media and all forms of communication. There's also stage design and anything that goes into the main worship room, like how that's set up and designed. Maybe even you're changing things out for Christmas and for Easter and all those special holidays. And then probably another one of the most important ones is discipleship and development of worship teams. Now, I don't want to rabbit trail too much here, but if you know me well enough by now, I do rabbit trail quite a bit. And I say discipleship and development, and I use them separately. I think a lot of times we try to interchange those words and overlay them to where they're the same thing. Is there some overlap? Absolutely. But where I believe discipleship kind of focus with the heart of the matter, and our personal relationship with God. And then development typically refers to um, the competencies and how you're growing in your craft. And so they overlap, but I also like to keep them separate to a degree. So we probably, maybe I didn't share anything new with you there of all those areas, and it's depending on how big your church is. Um, but I find that the most people that I come in contact with, and actually it's my current situation right now, I'm on staff at a church plant. And so we're a smaller church, and meaning the worship pastor, which is me, I have to kind of wear many hats. And really, until you get into like several hundred member churches and beyond, do you see that that's typically the case with worship leaders, worship pastors, that you're overseeing a lot of different areas. Um, so here's also the reality is it's kind of unrealistic to think and expect that that worship leader is skilled and gifted in all those areas. And so today I wanted to kind of break those areas up, and how I've done it and been taught and drafted a lot off of is pretty much um, 5 to 6 main areas. And the goal, um, I feel like the goal, if we truly believe that one of the main missions of the church is to equip the saints for ministry, and I'm not just talking about a Sunday morning expression church, but the church as a body. If our job is to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, which is biblical, then if we are the ones doing everything, like especially when it comes to a Sunday morning expression of church, then that's not a win. And so my encouragement today in this episode is to kind of like break those areas down, but then hopefully get you to start thinking, if you already haven't, okay, what are the areas that maybe I'm naturally good at? And then what are some areas that I can give away? And if you're like me, the temptation can be, because I'm kind of a perfectionist, and I like things done a certain way. And sometimes it's hard for me to give things away because I'm not sure how the outcome is going to be. Well, I'm learning to, okay, what's even something that somebody can do 80% as good as me. And if we're honest, we can find people that can do that and then give that away. Does it mean like you have no responsibility for it? No, you still can oversee that, but learning to, okay, give it away, because realistically we can't wear all the hats. Okay. So I wanted to give a shout out to my friends and my mentors at Worship Catalyst. So, if you don't know anything about Worship Catalyst, I would highly recommend you going on their website, checking them out. And I was actually one of their connectors for a couple years, and really they are great, and they're so good at like helping church planners specifically grow in their competencies and their leadership as all things worship, and helping train and develop worship leaders. So a lot of what I'm doing currently on my own, I have learned some of that from their mentorship of me, and just kind of getting to sit with them for a couple years. And so this Google sheet that I'm going to be sharing with you is something that I drafted off of them. I didn't take it specifically just from their helpful resources, but I remember Austin Ryan, the founder of Worship Catalyst, walking me through this several years ago. And so then I kind of wrote that all down in the church I was leading in at the time, and it got me to start to think about, okay, what are the areas that I can hand off? So I'm going to share this link with you, and it's a Google sheet. And if you're like me, like what could be helpful for you with this if you've not done this is to kind of take this, copy and paste it into your own document or Google Sheet or Word doc, whatever. And then you can visualize, okay, here's the different areas of my org chart, and here's what they are responsible for. And that may vary some in your context, but then encouraging you to start putting names in those areas to where you can start handing off these. And ultimately, you're helping create this thriving community within your church where you are empowering others for the furthering of God's kingdom in the local church. And so, as I mentioned earlier, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Arguably, I break this down to 5 or 6 areas. Okay, but for the sake of today's episode, I'm technically breaking this down into 5 different areas, and so when you see this, it'll make better sense or more sense. But I'm going to walk us through this, okay? So just like in every organization and probably even your church probably has, no matter how big or small, it should have some sort of organizational chart. Well, we've probably disserviced ourselves because, like I was trying to say earlier, is everything that falls under the worship leader's role can be a lot, no matter how big or how small your church is. And so I became aware that it was helpful for me to actually have that written down on paper, and start, okay, here's the areas that I oversee. And so typically, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. You're going to have your campus pastor or your lead pastor that's going to be over you. I mean, that's typically how it works. And if you've heard anything I've said so far in my last episode, I was talking about the things that worship leaders wish their pastors knew. One of those things I shared was the importance of that relationship between the lead pastor and the worship pastor. I believe, and maybe I'm a little biased here, I believe that's probably the most important relationship in the Sunday morning expression of church. Okay. And so, campus pastor, lead pastor, however that is, worship pastor, and this has been called several different things depending on your context. Some say creative arts pastor, worship arts pastor, but you're starting to see the terminology of more than just worship pastor or worship leader because there's so many elements at play under their umbrella. And so here's how I broke it down. So campus pastor, creative arts pastor, and then the first thing, and this isn't necessarily in any order of importance, but now I'm kind of to that bottom tier where now we're going to fan out here. And so um, admin leader. Okay, an admin leader, this person handles communication among the team, and that could include scheduling of the band and vocalist. Okay, so a lot of this stuff will be from my context, so it may differentiate a little bit with your context, but that's what an admin leader um, could oversee and be responsible for. And again, keeping in mind, if you're a small church, like myself and most of the churches I've been a part of, like you're probably wearing all these hats, but the goal is to start taking off some of these hats, okay, and sharing these hats. So, and then under admin leader, you have communication and scheduling. I kind of already said that. Next, tech director. Man, this is this is extremely important. In fact, I was just in a meeting today, getting to connect with some local musicians and creatives in the Kansas City area. And man, quickly, this became one of the things we were talking about, the importance of a tech director or a tech leader. And this is something I found in the previous church I was at, and really the church I'm at now. It's just we're not in a position to hire that. But like, that is such a special skill set. And most of the time, what happens is you have servant leaders within, or volunteers, I should say it that way. That's probably, it makes a little more sense. You have people volunteering for all these roles in your church because typically sometimes not even the lead pastor is able to be full time and collect a paycheck from the church. And so you just start having people that are willing and hopefully somewhat knowledgeable or trainable to fill certain positions. Well, this tech director, I believe, is one of the most crucial ones of the church. And why I say that, for the Sunday morning expression of church, everything you're doing, the preaching, the teaching, the special announcements, the live stream, like fill in the blank, all of those are typically using some sort of sound or amplification or technology to produce that and to send that out. And so you can have the best music team in the world. You can have the best communicator in the world. And if there's kind of like a breakdown in how you're hearing them via sound and EQing and all this stuff, like bad equipment, like that can automatically make them sound horrible and be a distraction to the people you're trying to reach, whether that's live stream or in person. And so that tech director, and I never had the luxury of having all these things underneath it, but I'm kind of listing several, is sometimes people say the A1 and the A2. The A1 is the front of house person, meaning the person running the sound system. And then the A2 could be an apprentice, somebody that's learning and being taught by that front of house person. Stage hands, like again, some of these are for bigger church contexts, but like stage hands could be people that are helping set up cables, running cables, setting up stage cues, or where people are located band-wise. If you have a lot of moving pieces or people that played here one week, but you're not having them play the next week, I think you get the idea. Lights, people running lights, media, like the Pro Presenter or the Media Shout, whatever visual software you're using. The live stream, I don't even have live stream written on here, but like that tech director is really overseeing a lot of that. And here's what I came to learn pretty quick is me as the worship pastor trying to like have a good handle on that and lead the band or the music team. Man, I quickly could find how that was starting to stress me a little bit because it's a lot to manage and oversee. So admin leader, tech director. Number 3 is producer. Now this is kind of I think by me sharing that, a lot of you could probably be tuning me out with this because you're like, man, we have a church of 60 people. What is even a producer? Like, are you talking about somebody with a headset and like on a movie set? Like, well, that's kind of the idea. And I always viewed and I came to believe that producer is really the quarterback for the Sunday. So making sure everything's running and like kind of overseeing the service flow and making sure people are hitting their cues. Now, again, I know that I'm sharing this and this may not be completely in your context, depending on the size of your church and what all you're running and pulling off. But keep in mind, even if you're a small church, like there could be a lot of benefit, I believe, in having somebody that could oversee the production and kind of that quarterback for everything going on the Sunday. So that's number 3. Number 4, music director. This is another big one that if you have the luxury to hand off, it can really make your job as a worship pastor, a worship leader, you can free you up a lot more to kind of pay attention to the room and the people you're shepherding and leading on church or at church. Not to mention, like, man, this is another episode that I'm going to be sharing sometime in the near future. But there's like 4 different uh voices, again, another thing I learned from Worship Catalyst, that you're kind of listening to, and conversations, that's probably a better way of saying it, that you're having on a Sunday morning as a worship leader. And so if you can have somebody that's leading and helping direct the band, and so a lot of times you'll see this at bigger churches, you'll have people with what they call a whisper mic, and this person is like talking to the band in their ears and helping direct traffic and lead the band. So those point worship leaders, kind of giving you away another thing that I'm getting ready to talk about, can free them up to focus on the leading of the congregation. So that's what I say a music director is beneficial at having, and they're the ones putting together the chord charts, sheet music, all that, sending things out, probably working with the admin leader, making sure the band is set up and ready to go. And then the last area, so I've shared admin leader, tech director, producer, music director, and then the last area is point worship leaders. So these could be not just your vocalists, but the people that are kind of the main ones out front leading the congregation. So let me kind of explain some of that, because at the previous church I was at, we had grown enough to where I had this luxury of pursuing some of these areas, and I was trying to impart leadership and build up people so where it wasn't just me doing all the work, right? That's the goal here, is like helping you um, develop others and equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And this is an expression of the work of the ministry. Is so case in point is I had a female vocalist who was one of my strong, like she had been with me for a while, and like, great spiritual leader, and modeled that in her lifestyle. And she I saw in her like, hey, this is a worship leader in the making. I really feel like she had the qualities and the talent to be a worship leader, but she would get insecure in herself because she didn't play an instrument. And so she's like, well, I don't know how to tell the band or the group what I want them to do. I am confident in leading songs, but like when it gets to like rehearsals. And so I learned how to set her up for success. So then I also had a guy on my team who had been playing music for quite a while, and you could tell he had kind of that musical um expertise isn't the word I'm looking for, but like he can kind of know how songs and structures should go. He could know how to communicate with the band and tell them what he's looking for, and he could sing, but he wasn't a super strong vocalist just yet. And so I began to look at ways that I could pair this guy and this girl together, and he could kind of lead the band through the whisper mic and rehearsals and kind of like chord charts and all that, making sure all that's playing off while feeding off of the worship leader. And it could make her comfortable and confident to lead the congregation when it came to Sunday. And so that's just one example of how those two areas can really help one another, and it frees up. For years, I've kind of had to function as both of those roles, and I can do it. But I love being able to impart leadership and free myself up to, like, I saw the benefits for myself when I can focus on one instead of all the things, one thing instead of all the things. It helps you lead more confidently. So those are the 6 areas: admin leader, tech director, producer, music director, point worship leader, and the person over those is the creative arts pastor. Now, again, keep in mind that you may be wearing all those hats. No matter how big or how small your church is, you may be wearing all those hats. And some of these may not super apply to your context, but the point of this is to get you to start thinking, okay, there are a lot of areas that it takes to cultivate a thriving worship ministry. And how can I give more leadership away, because everybody wins when that happens. And I know the tendency, let me just call it out. The tendency is like, well, if they've hired me to do the job, maybe you're a volunteer as well, and you are experienced and maybe seasoned, and there's a quality that you bring to the table. It's not just about performance. Don't hear me that. Don't hear me saying that. It's also about the heart and the posture of the heart. But we know that there's a level of competency, and then sometimes with when we give leadership away, it takes a step back. Let's just be real. Let's be honest. And maybe not. Maybe you have the luxury of, you have, like in my current context right now, I have some young talent in my church that, like, I don't feel that things suffer, and that's not the word I want to use, but I don't feel like there's this big step back when I'm not leading. I mean, goodness, I'm on a 3-month sabbatical right now, and I've not led at my church for the past 2.5 months. And everything has been great. Like I don't feel like people have left our church because they say, well, the worship has really took a dive. Like, I don't hear that. So that's that's part of the mindset, is like, unfortunately, we get in our heads and we think, well, they can't do this at the level that I do it, or am comfortable at letting somebody do it. And you got to start getting out of your head with that. I'm not saying you give everybody the stage right away. There's layers to it. Depending on the size of your church, like, think creatively of ways you can develop and invest in people. And I can get to those in later episodes and dive deeper into that. But I wanted to share this with you, for that reason, just to start getting you to think, okay, what are the areas that aren't covered? Am I trying to do it all? How can I give leadership away? And then the last thing I wanted to share today is, I am opening up some coaching spots. And so if you or anyone you're interested in you think they could benefit from these areas, um, these 5 areas, and really arguably I also classify it as 6 areas, because you have musical excellence, you have administration, you have technical knowledge, you have spiritual leadership, you have pastoral leadership, and so out of all those things, and I'm forgetting one. I'm sorry. Let me look at my notes here. I always tend to do this. Musical excellence, spiritual leadership, creative leadership. That's the one I was forgetting. Pastoral leadership, administration, technical proficiency. And so those 6 areas really encompass all the things, um, as a worship leader, and what they do and are responsible for. And so getting you to think more organizationally, as an org chart of sorts, will help you identify, okay, who do I see that quality in? And, like, I had people on my team that were great organizationally and administratively. And yes, they were good singers and they could probably be worship leaders, but I knew that I could give away some of this leadership of scheduling the band like a couple months in advance and planning songs. Like, that's kind of bleeding together administration and creative planning, because creative planning, for me, I would lump in song selection and choice. But that's the last thing I wanted to say. I'm sorry, I'm kind of all over the place here. Is that music director position and the point worship leader, you let them work in good relationship with one another. But at the end of the day, for me, how I would do it is the point worship leader has the final say, because they're the ones probably picking the songs, and so it just takes a healthy relationship there, to work good together. So back to the coaching spots. That's what I wanted to finish with is I'm opening up 5 spots right now for coaching, for one-on-one coaching, and I would offer 3 month and 6 month packages. And so, if you or anyone in your network or church or people you know could benefit from this, like have them message me, curtisbiswell@gmail.com, or on my social media. And I would love to set up a free discovery call where we can set up a Zoom call and I can kind of get an assessment of where they are, get to know them a little bit more, and see how best I could serve them, and then go from there. If they want to go with me, great. If not, that's cool too. But I wanted to make that resource available to you as I'm just trying to step into what I feel passionate about and what I'm called to do. So God bless. I hope this was helpful. Remember to you can download that link or you can access that link in the description for a PDF of that, or I think it'll just be a Google Sheet that you can look off of and then copy and paste it to use in your context, however. And then remember, if there's anybody that could benefit from coaching, one on one coaching, have them connect with me. God bless. Have a great rest of your week.